Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings here on Now TV. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And this will be the very last time, Lord willing, nothing happens, should say nothing else happens, that I'll be filming from this venue. As I shared with you last week, I'm losing my office space that I've had here on the third floor of the Daily Ardmore newspaper business since 2006. The newspaper sold to one outfit, the building sold to another individual, and they're going to be turning this facility either, we don't know exactly what it's going to be converted to, either a quote boutique hotel unquote, or a housing for the homeless facility. We've gotten 2 or 3 different stories. Don't know which one is true, but it's irrelevant, really. That's not up to me, obviously. So anyway, my wife and I have been hectically involved. We hired a couple of guys to help us. They were tremendous assistants, but my wife and I have been very busily engaged in moving. And as I mentioned to you last week, we have nine rooms here. It's unbelievable the amount of stuff we had accumulated. And of course, the great part of that is my library. A great part of it is inventory, but a great part of it is also support material. And so we had rented 2 separate new storage facilities. Both of those facilities are now full. My wife has a she shed in our backyard. It's getting ready to be almost full today. And so I tell you, it has literally been a madhouse as we try to determine, okay, this will go there, this will go over here. No, it can't go there. It has to go over here because my wife is trying to keep records. She's very highly organized like this, trying to keep records of exactly where we're putting the respective things. For instance, we had a book order come in yesterday for a book that we don't normally sell an awful lot of, and we don't carry a lot of that inventory. And so it was like, oh my goodness, where is that? Where's the inventory? Well, she got out her phone, did a little bit of a search, lo and behold, right there it is. And so, yeah, a lot to be said for being well organized, such as my wife is. So anyway, just want to let you know. Now, they're making really good progress on turning my 24 by 24 shop into a 24 by 28 or 48 shop and converting that into offices. We're probably still a month, perhaps 6 weeks out on that, although they're making great progress. So for the next little bit, I don't know exactly how long, but for the next little bit, I'm going to be filming from my house. I doubt that I'm going to be able to use the camera that I'm using right now. Don't have good enough lighting, really. And so I'm going to be using a little desktop camera that I use to film my 2 Guys in a Bible on fulfilledradio.com every Tuesday night. Now, it does a tolerable job for that venue. It's not exactly prime and optimal for Now TV, but I hope I get a little bit of grace along this line, you know. And so I hope that you will be patient with me as we try to work through this transitional period of time of having to move out, having to get reestablished. And you know, as fast as they're doing this building out on our property, my wife and I were talking about it. Okay, let's just say they get it finished in another month. That means we got to go through this entire move all over again. And I can tell you right now, my fatigue level is right here. Man alive, go home every afternoon, crash out for 2 or 3 hours, get up, come back, and do it some more. And then go home and crash for the night. So it has been very, very stressful, physically fatiguing, not to mention, the emotional part of this. I went through I went through several days of going, man, I'm going to miss this. I have just so enjoyed being in this facility. There's no one else on my floor. And so I've really enjoyed being up here, the solitude, the quiet. But hey, you know what? As I've said before, life happens. And we don't let life get us down. We don't let it destroy us. You know, I got a good friend right now that had been asked, literally asked, to apply for a preaching job. He had been told that this congregation thought he was the man. And so they really wanted him to apply almost as a formality. Okay, so he applied after giving it a lot of thought. And they told him, well, you know, we got one more guy that we got to have in. And my friend is not married, doesn't have a family, all right? Has no, quote, formal seminary training. But I tell you, this guy's smart. And he's zealous for the word. So they go through this 6-7 week process. And 1 week after another, well, we'll let you know next week. Oh, we'll let you know next week. I tried to warn him, honestly did, that since he was a preterist, they were going to be extremely reluctant, and it would finally come down to them hiring the other guy because he's married, got a family, got a degree. That's exactly what happened last night. And I know he's troubled. I know he's sad. I know he's disappointed. But, you know, I also know him. He's not a guy who allows life to destroy him. And I've been through something similar to that. I was asked on one occasion by the elders of a very large congregation to apply. They'd been looking for a minister for 2 years. I happened to be in town. One of the elders found out about that, asked me if I'd be willing just to fill in. I said, sure. Well, when I preached, they asked me to come and talk to them after services. And they said, we've been looking for a minister for 2 years. We think you're the man. Would you be willing to apply for the job? And I said, look, brother, I'm not really looking to leave where I'm at. I'm absolutely happy. It's a wonderful congregation, wonderful people. Well, yeah, okay, that's fine. But we can really make it financially lucrative for you to move. And it was in my hometown. And, you know, after praying about it and what have you, called one of the elders back up, and I said, okay, put my hat in the ring. He said, that's fantastic. We've all talked about it. We think you're the man. He said, we do have one more man coming in. And he said, we got to let him speak next Sunday. But he said, I think it's just a mere formality because he said, boy, you're the guy. Well, okay. So this elder called me back on the following Monday and said, I don't know how to tell you this, but the other guy's got a degree and you don't, so we think we better go with him. And I said, look, you know, you're the ones that approached me. I didn't apply for the job. You almost begged me to take the job. And he said, look, Don, I know. He said, we're horribly embarrassed about this entire scenario. He said, we don't know if we made the right decision, but we made the decision. I said, okay, that's fine. That's cool. And, you know, I was somewhat down about that. At the time, like I said, I didn't want to leave where I was at. Fantastic congregation. But being able to move back home, being able to get a very substantial pay raise, et cetera, yeah, that was kind of appealing. And to be asked to apply and to be told you're our guy, and then all of a sudden I'm not their guy, yeah, that was hurtful. Guess what? In 6 months, they fired the other guy, but they didn't call me and ask me to reapply. One of the elders told me later, he said, Don, we were so embarrassed over the way we had treated you that we just didn't feel like we'd better come back and talk to you again. Okay, that's fine. And you know what? It worked out for the better. My wife and I have a philosophy, and I'm taking up a little bit of time here, but my wife and I have a philosophy. We don't know where our train is headed. All we know is we're not in control. We're along for the ride. whatever the Lord wishes for us, that's fine with us. The ride may get a little bit bumpy at times, but we absolutely trust in the Lord. And we trust that when one door closes, another door will open. Only because of our faith in Christ can we have that philosophy. So, I'm sure my friend is going to fully recover. I am sure that probably in a real short period of time, he's going to be completely and totally back to his normal, absolutely positive state of mind. And you know what? I am confident that he believes, as I do, as one door closes, another door opens. You know, I hope that's your philosophy. I hope that you don't allow the negative things that happen to you in your life to destroy your happiness. Because you see, we decide to be happy. Happiness is not something that falls out of the sky on us. Happiness is not determined by what happens to us if we have the right attitude. And so, I hope your faith in the Lord and your faith that nothing can separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. As Paul said in Romans chapter 8. I hope that's your attitude. It certainly is mine, certainly is the attitude of my friend. So, with all of that said, all right, a little bit of perhaps life lesson on that. Now, I want to spend the rest of this video summarizing what we have seen over the last several months. And I'm going to skip over some things. I'm probably not going to remember everything, all right? But I want to summarize what we have seen about whether or not there is a gap between the 69th and the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9, 24 and following. And let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, I've just completed a 21 video series on the question, when did or when will the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9 come to an end? This is such an incredibly important topic. And this entire series, 21 lessons, is available for you to view. It is available or in MP3 form. It is available in video form. It is available for download on my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. And let me tell you, you're not going to find another massive series of lessons on Daniel chapter 9 that even begins to approach this series. I really believe that if you'll get this series on when did the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9 come to an end, I believe it'll transform your life. I really do. So avail yourself of that material. We've tried to keep it as inexpensive as possible. It's there. Please take advantage of it. Now then, so what we have seen over the last few months, and the reason I'm going to summarize all of that in this particular video is because beginning next week, we're going to continue our examination of the challenge of Christ in regard to the book of Revelation. I have been asked by any number of people to do a video series addressing the book of Revelation. I do want to tell you this. It's not going to be a verse-by-verse examination. That would result in 1,000 videos. I mean, you've probably figured out so far I'm a little long-winded. You've probably figured out so far that I kind of like to dig and I like to expand my presentations and I like to include all this other information and connect the dots between them. So you've probably figured that out. So, like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to examine the book of Revelation within the context, framework, and in the scope of the subject of the challenge of Christ. What is that challenge? Remember, Jesus said, John 10, verse 37, if I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. Period. Now, I've got to share this with you as a very quick anecdote. On Facebook over the last several days, I made the comment to some futurists who are adamantly opposed to full preterism, covenant eschatology, accusing me obviously of being a heretic, a false teacher, I'm doomed to hell, and all sorts of other accusations. And I said, here's the irony, ladies and gentlemen. To all of the people reading these posts, here's the irony. I am the one on here that is affirming that Jesus kept his word. I am the one on here affirming that the apostles and their predictions came true. And for affirming that Christ kept his word, that the apostles' words were true, that Jesus came within the time frame and within the temporal context in which he put it, like there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. For taking the stand that Jesus kept his word, I am the one being called, being called a false teacher and a heretic. And the ones who say that Jesus did not keep his word, in other words, every futurist on here is tacitly, and I said this, and I want you to please catch the power of this. I have never said that futurists overtly, willingly, purposefully say, yeah, Jesus failed, he blew it, didn't keep his word. No. They say instead, as we've been examining in our examination of dispensationalism, they say instead, well, yes, Jesus came to establish the kingdom. That was his purpose. That was his plan. He offered the kingdom to Israel, but they rejected it, and it made it impossible for God to fulfill the kingdom plan on time. Ladies and gentlemen, in my formal public debate with Thomas Ice some years ago in Florida, that debate is available for download and purchase on my website, darnkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. I accused Thomas Ice and Mark Hitchcock of teaching that Jesus failed. And they both just about went ballistic and said, we do not teach that he failed. And I responded by saying, you know what? If my wife says, I want you to go to the store and get some milk, get some bread, get some eggs, get us a snack, get us a Coke, blah, 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 and I go to the grocery store and I come back and didn't buy a single thing, I failed to do what my wife asked me to do, didn't I? Hello? I'm sorry. When MacArthur said, during the Second World War, as he had to vacate the Philippines, and he said, I will come back. If he would have never come back, did his prediction fail? Well, of course it would have. But we all know he went back. He kept his word. And so while I fully understand the shock value of saying that futurists teach that Christ failed, I know the shock value of that. And I do not accuse the great majority of futurists of willfully saying that Christ failed. But here's what you need to know. Noted evangelical scholar, minister, teacher, John MacArthur, admits in his writings that the language of Jesus and the language of the apostles certainly indicated that they believed that Christ was coming back in the first century. And he continues by noting, he continues by admitting, skeptics, atheists, agnostics, Jews, Muslims have used that language against Christianity for centuries. And it is difficult, MacArthur agrees, to explain how it is that the language seemed, without any question whatsoever, to indicate that Jesus was coming back in the first century, but he didn't do it. And the best explanation, therefore, John MacArthur says, is to take the position that while the language indicated a first century fulfillment, the reality is that Christ and the apostles wanted and want every generation of believers to be on, quote, the tiptoe of expectation, believing that this generation, their generation, will be the generation in which Christ returns. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I mean no disrespect to John MacArthur, but that is absolute, total nonsense. And by the way, in my book, Like Father, Like Son, on Clouds of Glory, I do, pardon me, an extensive point-by-point refutation of John MacArthur's book in which he tries to explain why the time statements of the New Testament don't mean what they say. So if you kind of follow John MacArthur and you want to see a biblical response to his attempts to explain away the time statements, do yourself a favor, go to my website, donkpreston.com or bibleprophecy.com. Go to my store, look up the book, Like Father, Like Son on Clouds of Glory. Now, when you order the book, be sure to send me a note that says you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, and that's going to save you $5. And by the way, if things keep going as they are, and if postal rates go up anymore, we're going to have to increase our charge for shipping because it looks really bad for the future in this regard. Okay, I've got to hurry. I've only got a few moments left here. Over the last several months, I've shared with you, if there is a gap between the 69th and the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9, then Christ either knew about it or he didn't. If he knew about it, and yet he said, the kingdom of heaven is drawn near, then he wasn't telling the truth, because there was, after all, a 2,000-year gap between the 69th week, which brought us to his baptism, and the so-called 70th week, or the 70th week, in our so-called future. So if there is a gap, and if Jesus knew about it, then he lied. He was mistaken. He was confused. Maybe he was deluded when he said, the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of heaven is drawn near. Folks, if there is not a gap between the 69th and the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9, then Jesus was absolutely correct to say, the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of heaven is drawn near. But you see, if Jesus was true and accurate and proper in saying the kingdom of heaven has drawn near, then there was no gap. Because God did not create a gap after Jesus said that. But if God created a gap after Jesus said that, then there is no gap in the text of Daniel chapter 9. And thus God created a gap after setting the time for the establishment of the kingdom in Daniel chapter 9 as the first century. Then if the rejection of Jesus caused God to create a gap, then there's not a gap in the text of Daniel 9, and yet Thomasites and most leading dispensationalists say, oh yeah, there's a gap in the text of Daniel chapter 9. Sorry folks, there cannot be a gap in the text of Daniel chapter 9 and Jesus be accurate and true when he said, the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of heaven is drawn near. Can't be true. So, there either is a gap or there is not a gap. If there's not a gap, then Christ was correct. If there is a gap, then Christ was wrong to say the kingdom of heaven has drawn near. Now, I've spent the last little bit, sharing with you that if there is a gap between the 69th and the 70th week, and obviously I'm skipping over many of the charts that I presented. If there is a gap between the 69th and the 70th week of Daniel, then please keep this in mind. As I have shared with you and as I've documented and as I've proven, the prophecy of Daniel chapter 9 is based upon the ultimate, the final fulfillment of Israel's feast days. Daniel chapter 9 includes the prophecy of Passover. After 60 and 2 weeks, in the 7 weeks, Messiah will be cut off. That's Passover. It foretold the cross, therefore. But it also foretold the making of the atonement. 70 weeks are determined to make the atonement. Daniel 9:24. Well, that's Yom Kippur. That belongs to the 70th week, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot have Yom Kippur finalized, finished, at the time of Passover. I'm sorry, that violates the entire chronology of the feast days. Daniel 9 foretold the bringing in of everlasting righteousness. That's the new heaven and that's the new earth. Now look, the making of the atonement and the bringing in of everlasting righteousness have to do with the fulfillment of Daniel 9 at the time of the resurrection. So if you put Daniel 9, the 70th week, if you put that off in the future, then what are you doing? Obviously, you're putting the 70th week off in the future, but the feast days are an integral part of the law of Moses, as I pointed out repeatedly in the last video. But the feast days are an inherent part of the law of Moses. And Jesus said, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law of Moses, containing the feast days, until it is all fulfilled. Therefore, if Daniel 9:24 and following is not fulfilled, the law of Moses remains in effect. Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week.